Okay, welcome to Let's Talk About. On this episode, we're going to talk about the basic configuration that you would do with a router and a switch. I cover this constantly through all four Cisco's in security, and I tell them this is probably the bare minimum that you would need to do to set up your router and switch. Then after that, you could do the more, sophisticated stuff. But this is the bare minimum that you have. On the screen here, I have a command line of just a router through packet tracer, and like I mentioned before, it can be this configuration can be used for both the router and the switch. So that's why I kind of like use this as a basic command. Quite often when you start your router switch, you will get this "Would you like to enter initial configuration mode" dialog box. Always type in no. The reason for that is if you type in yes, it's going to ask you a series of questions and you have to know the answer to all of them. And if you do not, you cannot finish and you end up restarting your router or switch again. And remember, anything inside of the brackets will indicate the command that could be used. So in this case, it's going to be yes or no. And if you click no, then it asks press return to get started, and you get going with that. You may get another one that you get confirm your configuration. Just hit enter and you can confirm that. Now, the first cursor you see is this greater than symbol. What that indicates is your user exec mode. This is a mode that you are very limited on what you can do. As you can tell here, there's just connections, exits, logging, pinging, show. This is where you would actually set up your console, your privilege exec mode, your passwords, and all that stuff like that. My favorite command, and I say this all the time, is the question mark. The question mark is a command that will help you learn about commands or anything of that nature. And an example of that would be if you type in enable and put question mark after it, it will tell you what you can enable. Enable view, enable levels, and anytime the question mark is after the word, it will give you the next command. In this case, if you see the term CR, that is old school typewriter verbiage for carriage return. So that just means push enter. If you put the question mark at the end of a command, it will tell you what if the command is finished or if there is more to the command than just that. So remember, the question mark past the word will give you any commands past that general command, and then the question mark right after the word will tell you if anything's missing after the command. So in this case, we'll go enable enter. And now if you notice, the prompt is changed to a pound sign. That means that you are in user exec mode. Here's where you'll be doing all of your programming, your password, and anything of that nature. You will also be putting a password at this level and also a password at the console level, which I'll be showing you here in just a minute. The one other thing I forgot to mention is if you type in part of a command, you can hit the tab key and it will automatically complete the command for you. So if you're like me and if you can't spell, then hitting the tab key will help finish your word. If it does not give you a word after it, that just means that there are two words that have the same couple of letters and you have to go out one more letter to get that. So in this case, if I type in TE tab, if you notice, absolutely nothing happens. But if you see up here, there's a telnet and a terminal command. So now if I type in TER tab, then it gives me the terminal command. And then of course you can use a question mark and do other things of that nature. So just remember, the tab is very important. The question mark is very important. And if you use the up and down arrow keys, it will give you a history of what you've typed in. So that way you can go back. It's kind of like the old DOS key that was in DOS where you could hit it and it would tell you up to 127 previous commands, which if you have to go back that far, you might as well start over again because you're too far back on that. So just remember, if you type in exit, it'll take you out of command line back. And if you notice, we're back at the user exec mode. And if you type in enable or en, you can even type in part of a word and it will fulfill the function of the word. So there are a lot of little tips and tricks that you can do to help you. Question mark, part of a word, part of the word plus the tab key. Just, experiment, play around with it. You can't really do much damage at this point. And remember, I'm saying at this point, so just remember that. Now, as you notice, we're in the privileged exec mode, which means we can start programming. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to type in config t. What that does is it puts you into what's called configuration terminal. Like I mentioned before, you can get that by typing config, hit the tab key, terminal, hit the tab key. And if you notice, it automatically spelled it out. Or you can type it out, configuration, configure terminal. Or you can type in parts of the word, like I always type in config t, because that gives me two configuration mode. Now, as I mentioned before in class, one thing you really have to pay attention to is pay attention to your prompt. Your prompt will tell you where you're at during your programming. If you're typing an interface, it will be config-if for interface. Router RIP or router OSPF, it would be config- whatever the command you're in. So pay attention to that. Also, if you are trying to do a command and it's not working, remember to do the question mark. And the question mark will tell you what commands are available at that level. And if your command is not there, that just means that you are in the wrong area or the wrong level of command programming. And down here, if you see the more command, that means there's actually more commands listed underneath it. So if you push the enter key, you'll go one line at a time. If you push the space bar, you'll go one whole screen at a time. So just remember that the enter key is one level or one command, and then the space bar gives you the whole list. And this is everything you can do at the config level on it. And like I mentioned before, if you're trying to do a command that does not work on any given level, do the question mark, and if the commands are not there, you're in the wrong level. It's that simple. So the first thing we're going to do is they all have a generic name, router, switch. So this case, you can give it a name, and that is as simple as host name. And you see how I typed in host and then hit the tab key and it filled it out. And then we can go R1, S1 for switch 1, whatever you want to call it. In this case, I'll call it Las Cruces, because that's where I live. And now if you notice, your router name is now Las Cruces. You can give router names different R1, R2, S1, S2. I typically don't give it too detailed of a name just because I don't want people to know exactly where this router is sitting. So just be careful when you do that. The next thing you want to do, and this is totally optional, is there is a command called no IP domain lookup. This is a command that will save you time as you're programming. What it does is anytime you make an error typing, you will have to wait up to 30 seconds to 1 minute for an error to go through your prompt because it's either looking for an IP address or a domain. Doing this will allow you to make mistakes and continually run. And why I mention that is if you make a mistake, you'll get 255, 255, 255, 255 in brackets, and you have to wait until it searches the whole domain and IP scheme to find it. This will turn that feature off, and it is just a nice little optional function that I always do just to make life easy because I can't type to save my life. So that's why the tab key is good and the question mark is good. The next thing I like to do is I like to type in the security issue. So we're going to go enable, and this is going to be secret, and then give it a password. There's a enable password and enable secret. What the enable secret does is it will take your current password you're typing in this case I'll do class, and it will encrypt it when you do a show run or when anybody views your configuration. It won't say class, it'll be encrypted on that. So that's why you would want to say like enable secret class. And then the next thing that you'd want to do is, this is another optional as well. There's something called a security password minimum length. Okay, here is where you can put in the minimum length of a password. So in this case, it can be 5, it can be 10, it can be 20, depending on how long or how secure you want a password to be. You can also, at this level, put in how many times somebody can log in before they're locked out, or that kind of thing. This is also optional, but I like using it. Just that makes people use at least a 5 to 8 to 10 character letter password when they're doing this or creating this. Then the next one is service password. Service password encryption. Service password encryption, this command right here is one that will protect you in the event you get hacked. What service and password encryption does is it will automatically encrypt all your passwords in your configuration file. Because like I mentioned before, up here you can actually put a password in that's in clear text or open to everybody to see. And if that's the case, then when you do a show run, which I'll be showing you in a minute, it will show you the password in clear text. But if you do this, the service encryption password, then it will encrypt the passwords automatically regardless of when you put them in on it. So this is an option, but it's a very good one that I always use myself. Okay, so this is basically getting set up with your security. This is getting into your going from privilege exec to exec mode. So now if we type in end or exit, exit will take you back one level of commands, and end will take you all the way back to the beginning. And if you notice, as you do stuff, you will have active lines showing up as you type, and that just means that you've done something that the router is now changing and it's showing you what's happening. So don't be surprised as you're typing that it is extended over or you're typing on another line. Just finish typing and you're good on that. Okay, so now we're back at the beginning. You see up at the top here, you see the router name. Now if I hit enter, I'm at the user exec mode. Now if I type in enable, it asks me for the password I put in earlier, which was class. And now I'm in. Remember, before that password did not exist. That should always be there. Now they have something called a banner function, or it's called message of the day. And that one config to. Remember, everything's in configuration mode. That one is you would just type in banner motd, or you can, or that also stands for a message of the day, and then choose a character that you're not going to use in your message. So we'll use the and sign, and now type in your message. This is a secure router or switch, and then end it with it. So you want to make sure that your banner actually begins with a character that's not in your message and ends with the character that's not in your message. And this is also an optional feature as well. Okay, now if you go back out, and if you notice now, there's your banner that you just put in. It can be anything you want it to be. You can say, you know, get off my router. It can be, if you have more than one person working on the network, you can leave them a message of what you did or what needs to be done. So it's an optional feature for you. And if you notice here, we're back at the user exec mode, which means you can't really do much. It won't let you see the configuration, as you can tell. And here's another thing I wanted to point out. Anytime you put in a command that doesn't work or it's not functioning correctly, this caret here will show you where the command stops working. So in this case, show is correct, but then the R where the run is not working. So what would you do here? The question mark. Now it shows you what you can put there. And if you notice, show run is not here. So that's why anytime you put a command in that does not work and you see that caret underneath the letter, that just means the command worked up to that point right there. And that's where you would put a question mark or put in the correct command after that. Okay, let's get back into enable password. Okay, now here's something of very important value to this a particular session. When you're in a session, it will keep track of everything you've done. So let's say here you put the wrong password in, or you don't know what you typed in. You can scroll back up and you can see what you typed in originally as that password. So if you mistyped it, it'll tell you right here. Remember, as soon as you close this window down, all that is gone. So that's why you always want to try all your passwords before you leave a session and make sure they all work. And if not, you can come up here and look. You can also see all the commands you typed in where you may have messed up something. But like I mentioned before, as soon as you exit this command, all that history is gone. And you can get history, but we'll cover that later as we go down. So okay, so we got the basic configuration. We got the basic going from user exec to privilege exec. Now, if you notice here, we're in the privilege exec because of the pound sign. Here is where you can do a show run or show running configuration. This will show you what you've typed in and also the information about your router or switch in general. If you notice here, it's got your version type, the dates, history, the name of the host. Here's your secret password. Remember, now it's encrypted, so it's safe and can't do it. All these other ones, don't worry about them as much. This is just your ID of your router and the license that you're using. Spanning tree, we'll cover that later. Here's your no domain lookup for errors. Here is where we'll be doing ports later, but here's the ports on your router, the gigabit, no shutdown, shutdown. Here's your serial ports. Here's your banner message of the day you typed in earlier. And then down here are your line con and your line VTY. The line con is basically that light blue cable that you plug into your router to program it. That's called your console cable. That is how you program this when you're there at the site. And we're going to put a password and on that one as well. Down here, we have line VTY. This is for telnetting. If you plan on telnetting from the outside into this router, you would want to put a password on these 5 ports. If you don't plan on telnetting at all, don't put a password on it, and it can't be accessed because it has to have a password to be accessed from the outside. So if you're not going to access it from the web, don't put a password on it. Safest way to protect yourself from outside sources like that. And this also tells you how many line VTYs there are. There can be 0 to 4, 0 to 4, 5 to 15, 0 to 15. When you're programming, you need to know that so you know what to type in here. And doing a show run will show you what the number of ports are that you have, what clock rates you can put, and if it's a gigabit or Ethernet port, it will show you here. So this will help explain a lot of your ports that you're programming. And if you type in a port, if it doesn't work, come in here and it'll show you what you should type in. 0001 or 0000. That's just a little common mistake that a lot of people do, and this helps you get the answer quickly. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do a config T, or configuration terminal. And if you notice, we're now back in here. Now we're going to do a line console 0 or line con 0. You can do it either way. And what that is, it's port 0 of your console. And if you notice now, look at your prompt. It has now changed to line configuration line, and from that, so now you know you're programming a line console. Okay, now here you want to make sure that you type in the password you want for that one. And actually, during this class, we use class and we use lowercase Cisco all the time. Just that way we know how to get into it. In the real world, you can use anything you want, just as long as you remember what it is on it. So the password is going to be password Cisco. The next one is going to be we're going to use it for logging in. See, this is how I remember it. And this is an optional one. It's something called logging synchronous. Logging synchronous, what that does is that helps you to where when you log in, you are not typing over other commands like you would previously. So this helps you keep everything on a single line, a line break for you as you're typing. Just makes it easier to watch what you're typing and keep everything together. Optional, but I use it all the time. And then the last thing you're going to do is exit. And now that's how you just program your line con 0 or your console, the light blue cable that you see. And if you notice here, it went back to console. Now, let's see what happened. we type in exit, exit, and we go back to the beginner. This is when you first get into your router. Now when we go in, we have a password. This is the password you just put in. And remember, there's your banner message of the day. Okay, now you're in the router from the console port. Now if you type in enable, now it's going to ask you for the first password you put in, and now you're in. So if you notice, you got two layers of passwords there. You got the console port cable password, and you got the privilege exec password. Just be careful of which one's which. And like I said, if you ever forget what you typed in, you can always scroll up here during this session and see what you did originally. Yeah, emails. Okay, so now we're going to. Okay, let's say now you want to do telnet, or you want to do a secure shell. Type in enable again, and then type in config t or configuration terminal. Now this time we're going to type in line VTY04. For those of you that are old school, line VTY is the old video terminal emulation software that they used back in the day when you had the green text on black. That's what VTY means. You're going to have either 0 to 4, 0 to 4, 515, or 0 to 4, or 0 to 15. Remember, up here when you did the show run, it actually showed you what you have on this particular router. So in this case, it'll be line VTY04. And then if you notice, it's changed back to the line command, and you're going to do just like you did with the other one. You're going to do the password, and I'll use class on this one. And then you're using the password to log in, and then we're going to use the login synchronous. And I love the tab function here because I can't spell synchronous, so that's why I like that feature. And then you're going to exit, and then exit out again. Okay, now we're basically done with the basic configuration. You are now password protected for going into privilege exec. You're password protected for going into your line con cable and your telnets. You have a banner message of the day. All of your passwords are encrypted, and the way you can tell that now is at the command prompt here. If you do a show run or show running configuration, there's your secret password, there's your service encryption, your name. We haven't programmed any ports yet. Remember, this is just the basic configuration for a switch and router. Down here is your line con 0 or your console port. Look, it's been encrypted. And here's your password for your if you want to do telnets. There are different levels, password from 0 to 15, but like I said, that will be covered in a higher course. All you're learning here is what would be the basic programming you do every single time you go into a programming of a new router or switch. Then after that, you would program the routers or switches, ports, security, those kind of things like that. This is what I tell the classes to do all the time. When I was in a job interview, they had me program this from memory. It's not that hard to remember, but it is the basic structure that they'd like to see. And I'm just touching your bare minimum of the configuration, but this is what you would need to get going and to secure yourself before you start programming your live lines and your ports and all that kind of stuff. So now what we need to do is we need to actually save this configuration. And remember from earlier, there is a copy running configuration to startup configuration. What this does is this copies what you just programmed in the RAM and puts it into the NVRAM or flash memory. So if you hit that, then you get the what do you call the destination file. Remember, between the two brackets is what it will use. So just push enter here, and now it's copied it. Why do that? Because if you don't do that, and if the power goes off on your router and comes back on again, you have to start over again. But if you, and I do turn off the routers periodically if I see that you have net copies, so just be aware of that. And also, if you did make a copy run start and if the power did go off, all you have to do to get your configuration back is do a copy start run. And now it's going to copy it the opposite direction. So now it copies it from your backup or your NVRAM back to RAM, or vice versa. So you can go from the running configuration, which is, remember, that's your RAM, to your startup configuration, that's where the boot's from, or vice versa if you lose the information on it. That you would do all the time. And you can also do a show run, and you can actually copy your configuration and you can paste it into a text file and put it back. There are many, many, many ways of restoring a configuration of a router and switch. You can do it from a server, from a memory stick, from your NVRAM, from a text file. These are all covered. Like I said, what we have here is the bare minimum that you would need to do to get your router so you can now start programming it and get it up and running. This is just securing it and getting the basic config going. So with that, I'm going to get out of here, and I think that covers it pretty much. I will have copies of the form that I use with the commands on this, and I will put as a supplement to this, and you can download it and view it. So I hope this helps you out. And remember, your favorite friend, or my favorite friend, is the question mark and the tab key. So just remember that. And everybody have a good day and happy programming.